Can Eucalyptus Nitens be coppiced? When I first researched into growing eucalyptus around 2017, 2018, I was led to believe that they couldn't. And those that have been blown over in the storms, although they made a valiant effort to put out new shoots and regrowth, always perished. This is the latest one here. And what I'd say in defence of Nitens, because a recent comment suggested that they could be coppiced. Two things. First of all, the storms are during the winter, so it's cold, so any new growth doesn't really get a chance to take hold. And secondly, all of these were wind blown, so the roots were disturbed. This past winter saw one of Ireland's most severe storms, Storm Éowyn, and it was very impactful here. The eucalyptus foliage before Storm Éowyn blew through was lush and green. I was really pleased. After Storm Éowyn, there was hardly any foliage at all. It had been scorched by the strong cold winds. And that's had an interesting effect on the Eucalyptus Nitens. Many of them, if not all of them, have started putting out fresh juvenile foliage from the trunks. So perhaps Eucalyptus Nitens can be coppiced. I'll start experimenting next year, cutting back a few of the larger specimens, although I'll definitely be leaving it till late spring, so growing conditions are more favourable and they'll have much more of a chance of recovery. Fabulous fresh growth on these. These are quite thin and small specimens down here. Perhaps if I cut back some of the larger specimens around them, they'll get a chance to grow thicker. There's this one, perhaps 15 centimetres at breast height. My best Nitens specimen behind me here was relatively unscathed by Storm Éowyn, perhaps due to a slightly more sheltered aspect, although it's not much more sheltered. I think the most likely explanation is that it's always been well nourished, and that's definitely been something I've learnt during the past couple of years. If you feed trees a highly nutritious diet, I used to chuck all the kitchen scraps around that area, and also from now on, for the past year and a half or so, I've been sure to give anything I've planted a very generous helping of organic poultry manure, and that's definitely paying dividends. It's being ravaged by the eucalyptus leaf-eating beetles, which have made an appearance in the last couple of years. Even though it's very healthy, it was covered in flower buds earlier this season, and I'd say the trunk is easily 20 centimetres at breast height after 6 years, 2018, 2019 sown. So yeah, about 6 years. Viable Nitens seed has been hard to come by for the past few years. I haven't actually tried during the past 12 months, but prior to that it was expensive, far more expensive than the first Nitens seed I bought, and none of it germinated. So I more or less gave up buying Eucalyptus Nitens seed, and where I've had Eucalyptus Nitens losses, I'm going to be planting Eucalyptus globulus, which is the same family. And the reason why I was so keen on Eucalyptus globulus was that from the start I was led to believe you could coppice Eucalyptus globulus. This one's a couple of seasons old. It didn't have the best of starts. It's now perhaps 3 meters tall, and I would expect those that I plant from now on with a much better feeding regime will grow significantly faster. Sunlight's also an issue for not just globulus, all trees, all or most vegetation. Certainly for eucalyptus trees, and those that are in the back here, which are shaded, have definitely done less well, even though that one there, if you can make that one out, sun's in the way. This one here was larger than the one at the front when I planted them, and as you can see, this one's perhaps a metre, just shy of 2 meters tall, much thinner in the trunk and definitely less vigorous. I'm keen to trial globulus. I would say that globulus aren't the hardiest in the world. Neither are Eucalyptus regnans, though Eucalyptus regnans are just at 2-3 degrees hardier, more resilient. And in terms of growth rates, these are 6 months younger than that best globulus up there, and yet they're easily a metre taller. So very fast growing. And in terms of a timber tree, I'm not expecting them to be a commercial timber tree here in Ireland, because if there is a severe -9, perhaps a timber tree, a commercial timber tree nearer to the coast or in areas that don't get severe frosts. This is a north-facing slope, as I've said many times, so it's not an ideal location. But in terms of a tree, a commercial tree, the common name for Eucalyptus regnans is Tasmanian oak, and that will give you some indication of the quality of wood that it grows. I suspect, like all eucalyptus, it will be fantastic firewood. My small patch here is exposed to what can be very severe and cold Atlantic gales during the winter, and I'm starting to build up a picture of the varieties of eucalyptus I need to plant to have most success, and they certainly include Gunnii. Interestingly, these did get frazzled as well by Storm Éowyn, though they're putting out good new growth now from epicormic buds in the bark. And this one at the back here, I cut back perhaps 18 months ago. Since then, it's put on easily 2 meters of growth. So Eucalyptus Gunnii definitely can be coppiced. Let's see the stump there. Always pleasing to see wildlife. There's a lovely spider. Oh, 2 spiders crawling around in there. Just fabulous to see that. Always enjoy that. Looks like they're fighting for territory. Hopefully that's coming out in focus here on the camera. Absolutely great. Love it to bits. Other varieties that can be coppiced. These are glossines, which I cut back earlier this year. I think I did a video on it, so you'll be able to look back to see exactly. I think from memory, perhaps April, May. And at the same time, I cut back all of these parvula. And as you can see, they're both growing back very vigorously. And by cutting them back, it's let light into these pulverulenta. Pulverulenta aren't a firewood eucalyptus. They would be more suitable for bees. Prolific flowers during the early part of the year. My experiences here have been anywhere from February onwards for at least 2 months. You can see by just how many capsules there are, just how many flowers there were. And here's next year's flower buds forming. These are Arnagera, and likewise cut back at the same time, and as you can see, these have sprung up perhaps half a metre of growth. I didn't cut these back as severely as I have done in the past, or my strategy was to leave at least half a metre in most cases. Though having a look at, about half a metre, cut them back to about half a metre. So best of these have perhaps put on a metre during the summer. Certainly there's a stem there. It was cut back to less than a metre, perhaps less than half a metre, perhaps maybe half a metre, but that stem there is easily a metre. So Arnagera definitely can be coppiced. I'm repurposing this area, or I'm changing slightly how I'm going to grow any eucalyptus from now on. So it won't be in racks, but this will still be a sheltered area for them. As you can see, the wind blows over these polypots, 4-litre polypots, and this is how I'm going to grow eucalyptus from now on, and all other trees. What I'm going to do is start them in large plug trays. These are globulus at the back and viminalis in the front. Lots of regnans here. As I say, very keen on regnans. They just grow so quickly. And once they've established themselves in the large plug trays, then transplant them, pot them up into these 4-litre polypots, which was what I did originally. And what I'd say is trees need room to move around. Generally these are big trees. I really struggled with these sequoias for a couple of years, and I wondered, is it because they're too hot or they don't have enough food? I think perhaps not enough food, definitely. And as for heat, I don't think so. You can see where that one there wasn't doing well, and then I potted it up, gave it a really good feeding of poultry manure, and they're all very healthy now. As I say, I'm going to have to do something about the wind blowing them over all the time, so the sheltered area will be reinstated for that, but using the large polypots. I've just done a short update on Paulownia, so I won't linger long here. What I'd say to carry on from my strategy of potting up into larger polypots and feeding very generously. These Paulownia have had that treatment and they're much more robust. I'm really confident that these will survive till next season and start to thrive. I'm standing well back so you can see these poplar in their entirety. There's a saying with plants: first year they sleep, second year they creep, and third year they leap. These are in the ground perhaps 4 years, as are these subcrenulata, 3-4 years. Certainly this year they've leapt. I'd say that's as much down to the growing season we've had, drier conditions and warmer conditions. Good quality, viable eucalyptus seed is generally in short supply, or it was the last time I tried to find it about a year or so ago. and that's a shame because these are Eucalyptus subcrenulata and they're fabulously wind resilient. I'd plant a lot more of them here. That one's flowering, that's just fabulous. Late flowering for the bees, so if you're a beekeeper with late bees that need feeding, then subcrenulata is one of the varieties to try. And that's great because that's coming from a different tree, because there's also buds on this one, and there were some buds on one last year. So fingers crossed I do get some seed. That would just be fantastic, because I say these are just by far and away the most wind resilient of all the eucalyptus I've planted here. Generally the hazel that I planted have done okay, though a couple of them got severely ravaged by some caterpillars earlier on, so they're obviously not going to do as well. But generally speaking, I'm looking forward to these maturing and producing some hazelnuts. I'll plant some more of them next year. They'll be potted on into polypots and generously fed, so that they have the best chance of success. Another couple of globulus that have made it. This one here will certainly start to outpace the, I think it's elderberry at the back there. Elder is apparently one of those varieties that you definitely don't want to burn wood of. Not that you would grow these for firewood, because they're a bit small, to be honest. Anyway, as I say, another three decent globulus I have, covered in blue gum suet, but it doesn't seem to hold them back any, and they just carry on. So 2 meters easily in a year and a half. Definitely one to try, especially if you have a sheltered south facing slope. This area here, quite a few viminalis were blown over by a previous storm several years ago. Some of them have sprouted back. Viminalis definitely coppice. There's one of them there. Though viminalis also get ravaged by the gales. So many of these have grown back, have put out epicormic from buds from the bark after Storm Eowyn. Also, so many of them are being ravaged by eucalyptus leaf-eating beetle. And that coincided with me getting rid of some common black and yellow wasps. So do come back, wasps, all is forgiven. These are viminalis. And generally, some of these viminalis are doing really well. Becoming not just quite tall, but also thickening in the stem. This one has always been a nice tree. It's always been sturdy, but it is very exposed here on the corner. So I doubt that it's ever going to be a 40-foot giant, but it continues to recover every year and put out new growth after the storms ravage it. I had high hopes for Rodwai being a more resilient, wind resilient variety. They're surviving. I wouldn't say they're thriving. Perhaps this next year they'll do the First year they sleep, second year they creep, and third year they leap. Fingers crossed on that. The sawdust from processing all the logs into firewood. That will rot down and provide slow release food for these viminalis. And they also provide food for lots of the bugs and insects. More Rodwai on the bank here. Further along, they're a bit more sheltered. As I say, not giving up on them entirely, though they're not going to be the really tough, wind resilient variety I'd hoped for. Gunnii certainly are. And this is one of the larger specimens I have, and it's definitely 25 centimetres at breast height. Becoming a very chunky tree. When I spoke about the Nitens, one of the reasons that they didn't make it was because they'd had their roots pulled, disturbed. This is a Gunnii. It was blown over during Storm Eowyn. Cut the top off it. It's regenerated, as you can see. Lots of fresh new growth from epicormic buds, and it seems to have been unfazed by having its roots disturbed. So in terms of coppicing varieties, Parvula, Viminalis to some extent, not quite as hardy as Gunnii, Parvula, Ernigera, Glossines. This is an Ernigera here, and it's taken these a wee while to get going. There's a Eucalyptus leaf-eating beetle. I wonder if that came out and shot there. I'm seeing more of them. That's disappointing. Anyway, these Ernigera, there's a line of them here, took considerably longer to establish than the original Viminalis and Gunnii in this area. I would think that competition, the larger trees, will take up more of the nutrient in the soil and have their roots further down and have their roots linked more intricately with the mycelium network. So smaller trees need to wait their turn. But I will be planting more just to keep up with losses. Here's one that blew over and I chopped, and hasn't put on much growth this year, but then it's very shaded here. This one's done quite a lot better. Wasn't blown over completely. But as you can see, one growth from further down. This one's really interesting. It's perhaps 1.5 meters, 2, until it starts going upwards again. And this year it's coming out with more new growth lower down. One of these was flowering. I looked at these the other day. Ah, here we go. Yeah, lots of flowers. Look at that. This is a Dalryempliana. Pretty positive about that. And lots of wee flowers on it. So if you're a beekeeper, eucalyptus are definitely one for all year round flowers. Plant several different varieties and you'll not lack for nectar for your bees. There's a Eucalyptus leaf-eating beetle there. It's not actually the beetles that eat the foliage, it's the larvae. So I'm not sure what to do about them. There's a wasps which lay eggs in the larvae. Fingers crossed I get some of them. The larvae squirt out a cyanide type liquid if they feel threatened or attacked. There's lots of them. Look at that. There's another one there. That's very disappointing. Fingers crossed for the wasps. One thing I want to say in this area is that these are quite close to the polytunnel here, and they're a wee bit spindly. I'm not sure if I'm going to leave these. Might get blown over in the gales. It's a bit late in the season now for cutting these. This one as well I left because it had flower buds on it, and I'm now starting to think, see, there's seed pods there, but I'm now starting to think, and with the gales the other day it was a rocking back and forth since I cut all the ones around it back down, coppiced them, so now it doesn't have the same amount of protection. Decision time in the next couple of days. As I say, getting late on in the season now for doing it. Another couple of Arnigera here, replacements for wind-blown Viminalis. Like I say, they're slow to take. They've been in the ground probably a couple of years. What my feeling is that the larger trees are having first pickings of any nutrients and access to the mycelium network. Generally though, I am very pleased. These are definitely doing well. So, can Eucalyptus Nitens be coppiced? I'll find out next year when I cut back a few of these and see what happens. I don't think I'm favoured by the location here, a north-facing slope exposed to the Atlantic gales, North Atlantic gales. If you're growing them on a south-facing slope that's sheltered, then you might have more success. I'd still recommend cutting them back late spring, early summer. Those that blew over with the gales here were putting out new buds, but they never came to anything. It was early on in the season, and additionally they'd had their roots pulled, and that might also have been a factor. Either way, my focus is going to shift now towards the very hardy varieties. Parvula, Arnigera, Glossines are growing commercially, so I do have some Glossine seed. That'll definitely be one that I'll prioritise. Gunnii, very tough and hardy as well. Subgranulata, from my experience now, have by far been the most wind resilient and hardy. I'm not sure what their firewood would be like, but definitely in terms of a tree for shelter here on the west coast of Ireland, Eucalyptus subgranulata would be second to none. The other varieties that I'm going to focus on are regnans, which I showed you down the bottom there, very fast growing. I didn't show you the ovata next door to them until now, that is. These are ovata here. Another very fast growing variety, though none of those that I planted previously survived the 2022 -8, -9, though that was a prolonged cold period, almost 2 weeks. And in fairness, only one of the regnans survived it, but it's now thriving. This is it here. It's easily 6, possibly 7 metres tall now. It would have been another couple of metres tall, I'm sure, if it wasn't for the fact that the heavy snows after that 2022 year put paid to the main shoot, which snapped, and I cut it back. So 2022, 21 it was planted, so 4 years, 7, 9 metres in 4 years. I don't think there's many trees can do that. Thanks for taking the time, always appreciated. Good luck.